we are giving you an update on Hurricane Dorian. I know that leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. We're all tired of Dorian, waiting for it to get out of here. So the good news is that point is coming pretty soon. We just need to deal with the next couple of days, and then by this weekend, hopefully the storm will be out to sea, and then we can kind of regain some normalcy and go back to what would have been a good Labor Day for many of us before Dorian came along and decided to change those plans, particularly and most sadly for our friends down in the Bahamas. So let's get right into it. The current information coming out of the National Hurricane Center, we've got winds of 110 miles per hour. This was at the 5 o'clock advisory. There have been no updates in terms of the storm status at 6 p.m. They've been doing like these hourly updates here, and I would not be surprised if the storm does intensify just a little bit more, wobbling within a couple miles per hour with max sustained wind speeds. I don't want you to be alarmed if you see that Dorian goes from a Category 2 hurricane to a Category 3. The reason being, with winds at 110 miles per hour, you're at a Cat 2. With winds at 111 miles per hour, you're at a Cat 3. So we're right on that threshold. So again, later tonight, if you do see that the storm goes from a Cat 2 to a Cat 3, don't be alarmed. Just stay with us. We'll keep you updated on everything. And so as this storm progresses into tonight, in the next couple of days, it's going up the coast. We could possibly see a landfall somewhere in the Carolinas. I'm thinking the better chances would be for one of the coastal areas in North Carolina, maybe Wilmington or, again, near Morehead City. So as this progresses, we'll continue to see it skirt the coastline right out into the Atlantic, and it'll be moving by pretty quickly. We're not going to have a situation where it takes a couple days to get its act together and move up and about. So that's the good news with this storm, is that it will eventually skirt its way off into the sea and stop causing problems for all of us here, because frankly, I think everyone is tired of this storm at this point. So as it does that, it will weaken moving off. Just right now, it's maintained itself. It's been a resilient storm because it's over the warm Gulf Stream. It's over warm waters, and it doesn't really have much working against it in the environment. So it's been able to maintain status as it's gone on through the past couple of days. And with that, taking a look at this radar over here, I want to zoom in a little bit closer to the southeast on this radar because I want to show you something very interesting that I noticed today with this storm. So I think that's further out. There we go. We're headed in the right direction here. So you see Dorian getting very close to the coast there, but you'll notice that those feeder bands aren't making it very far inland. This is radar and satellite composite. So the blue areas that you see there, that's satellite imagery. That's cloud tops, not rain necessarily. The green would be the radar, and that's where we're seeing the rain. That's the radar showing the signatures of rain. But notice it seems like there's almost a very clear-cut line that goes straight down the coastline. It's almost as if I-95 is like some magical border on this bucket of rain that's just trying to come through. And that's on account of the steering mechanism that is going to be taking Dorian up the coast and out to sea. It's kind of created this best case scenario for us here in the southeast, particularly in Florida, where, yeah, we saw a couple of strong feeder bands come through central Florida yesterday and over into the overnight. Even in North Florida, I'm in Jacksonville, I'm on the west side, I'm not very close to the coast. And early this morning, we saw a pretty hefty band, feeder band coming out of the storm, very heavy rains, some gusty winds. And there have been some gusty breezes this afternoon, I would call them. Not very long living gusts of wind at that. And when I measured them, my Kestrel was maybe 10, 15 miles per hour for the inland portion of the Jacksonville area by 301 at that. So doing very well in terms of what we could have experienced from this storm if it weren't for the system at play. So allow me to introduce our buddy that's been doing us some very big favors here. This is a look at water vapor imagery. This is from the upper atmosphere, looking from the top down. It's about 300 millibars, so way up there in the atmosphere. The pocket that you see here, the orange, is dry air. So we have an upper level trough that I know Leslie and Mike have been explaining. That trough is the steering mechanism that's keeping Dorian from moving into the inland parts of the U.S. It's just riding up the coast because this trough isn't letting it come in. So the way I'd like to describe this is as Dorian has moved across, you've heard of the Bermuda High by now. That was the first tugboat that was moving the big ship that is Dorian through the Caribbean Sea. Unfortunately, around the Bahamas, when Dorian was this Category 5 beast, that tugboat moved out and Dorian just sat there unguided for a whole day. Then this trough, tugboat number 2, came in and has pulled it up and will be moving it out to sea. And it's going to be moving pretty quickly in comparison to what we've seen so far with the storm. And with that, this dry air has really prevented a lot of those feeder bands from coming in. As soon as they try to roll on land, all that rain just evaporates. And we are not seeing the worst case scenario that we could see with, a lot of times, especially in coastal areas, when these feeder bands come through, there's the rotation and you'll see little spin ups, water spouts, some tornadoes. There's a few tornado warnings through North Florida earlier this morning, very short lived. And I don't know if we actually had a confirmed tornado, talking about a tornado warning in St. Johns County earlier today. So again, we haven't seen as much of the feeder band activity for inland portions of the Florida-Georgia line there and most of the Florida Peninsula. And that shows with the rain that has accumulated over the past 48 hours. You notice this bright blue, purple, even the reds and oranges being very heavy rainfall in the order of 5, 10, 15 inches of rain, staying offshore close to the inner core of the storm. But the feeder bands that have swept over the Florida Peninsula, not really dropping all that much rain, maybe 2, 3 inches, maybe in very isolated areas north of Daytona Beach by Bunnell, Ormond Beach, maybe getting 5 inches of rain. So when it comes to tropical systems and a Category 2 hurricane off the coast, we're doing pretty good. This trough has really helped us out a lot. So the main risk that we're looking at going forward, already been a problem today, yesterday, ever since Dorian has approached the southeast U.S., has been storm surge. So the churning of seas with this violent beast overhead has really caused some problems. I know here in Jacksonville, out at the beach, the mayor tweeted about this several times today, a couple of instances where people went out to the beach. Either they went in the water. Yesterday I saw some windsurfers in the water when it was a little less chaotic out there. But one woman was standing on the beach. She was standing on the shore just watching the waves. Tide came in, swept her off her feet, and took her right into the ocean. She had to be saved by lifeguards out there. So it just goes to show, if you don't have to venture out, please don't. And really, there shouldn't be a reason for you to venture out at all. So just don't do it. Don't go outside. Just stay home. Stay with us here on My Radar. And we have our very own storm chaser, Aaron Jack, who should be heading up to, I believe it's Charleston, South Carolina tonight. And he will show you all the views safely. He's a professional. We don't want you guys venturing out and finding yourself in danger, because you may look outside and say, oh, it's just a little bit of rain, or it may be quiet and you head out and a feeder band comes through and problems occur. So all that aside, please just be very careful and heed your local warnings. But radar for the next couple of days will look like this. Dorian staying offshore for most of its life here as it moves up the southeast coast. We could see a landfall, like I said earlier, in the Carolinas. So that's what we're watching for as we head into Wednesday, tonight, Thursday, and in the beginning of Friday. We're getting very close to the South Carolina coast here, which is why places like Charleston, Myrtle Beach are seeing the issues with storm surge. Again, depending on how close the core of Dorian comes to the mainland, we could see some of those Category 1, maybe even Category 2 winds coming onshore, depending on how close the eye wall comes to land, because those Category 2 winds are going to be very, very isolated to the eye wall itself. And that depends on how well Dorian keeps itself together. Since it's been over the Gulf Stream, yesterday we saw the western side of the Gulf Stream kind of getting its act together, bubbling up, a lot of convection on the western eye wall because that part was over the Gulf Stream. And then as it's continued to move north and the Gulf Stream kind of strays away from the coast, the eastern eye wall was starting to see some convection and activity with that. So as this continues to move closer to the coast, hopefully it won't have as much of that fuel source with the warm waters, and we'll begin to see some weakening going through the day. But the official forecast has this hurricane holding its own as a Category 2 until it breaks away from the Outer Banks. So definitely want to be careful with that. Going into tomorrow, we will see winds begin to pick up. I know today has really just been the surf, but going into tomorrow is when we'll see some of those winds picking up for you folks. Off the coast of Georgia tonight, really, you'll begin to see those feeder bands come near the coastal areas, Tybee Island, St. Simon's Island, seeing those issues, Augusta. But Augusta's a bit inland, so it would be far and few between that you see those effects. But going into the next couple of days, wind speeds, we've had 30-mile-an-hour winds here in Jacksonville today, 26. I believe there was a wind gust in Charleston around the 5 o'clock hour of about 51 miles per hour. I might be misspeaking on it. It was about 50 miles an hour gust, not a sustained wind, that was measured there. So going on through the next couple of days, winds definitely are going to pick up. I'm not saying you're not going to notice this. You will definitely notice that a tropical cyclone is whisking by, even if you are a little further inland, making big waves here for our weather pattern going into the end of the week. So with 5 o'clock rolling by, new watches and warnings been issued further north because the storm is going to be moving by very quickly. So the area you see there in yellow, tropical storm watch. Now I wanted to go through this. That is going to include the tropical storm warning goes from the Flagler-Volusia line in Florida, goes all the way up to the Savannah River, North Carolina, going north across the Virginia border. And I don't know how to say this town name, so please don't hate on me too much. I'm going to try my best. Chincoteague, Virginia. That's also including Chesapeake Bay. So with that, some tropical storm warnings as this whisks by. More than likely going to see some of those feeder bands and tropical storm force winds sustained, going more towards Friday, I think, so in the next 36 hours or so. But the storm surge warning goes all the way from the Flagler-Volusia County line here in Florida up to Pocosin in Virginia, and that's going to include Hampton Roads. So all of us are going to see that risk, especially with the tides being higher because of the lunar phase, and just overall, I know a lot of places are experiencing a king tide. So with that, we have that greater risk of the storm surge potential. And I have some numbers here from Isle of Palms up to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Storm surge expected of 5 to 8 feet. From Myrtle Beach to Cape Lookout, 4 to 7 feet. From Duck, North Carolina to Pocosin, Virginia, including Hampton Roads, 2 to 4 feet storm surge. That's coming out of the 5 o'clock advisory there. So main tips here. Be very careful. Stay away from the coast. Know if you are in a flood zone or if you're in a coastal area that is prone to flooding and you may be at risk for some of the storm surge. Know your individual risk. And if any of these local agencies have issued evacuation orders or some other kind of action that you need to take, please heed it because it is for your best interest. Please don't brush this off because Florida has fared so well as Dorian passed by. It stayed off the coast the entire time. At its closest approach, though, there were over 9,000 power outages. There were plenty of issues that we were dealing with here, even though it stayed 80 to 100 miles off the coast. So it's going to be much closer to you folks up in South Carolina, North Carolina, and some of the fringe effects up there in Virginia as well. So please be very careful with that. And I think I beat that horse to death, but here's a look at some of those storm surge potentials going into the rest of our week here. So Florida still going to see some of those effects, about a foot of storm surge. That's above ground level. So storm surge starts already at that ground level. As we continue moving further north, as we get into, say, Georgia, North Carolina, you see more of those yellows and oranges. So about 3 feet above ground, 6 feet above ground. Seeing a little bit of red there just south of Georgetown, north of Charleston. And that makes sense because that's where we're expecting to see that little dip in North Carolina is where we're starting to see in the forecast that we could see the closest approach of Dorian for the southern part. And of course, the Outer Banks. North Carolina's topography coming off the Appalachians, you see the slope, and then things kind of flatline all the way out to the coast. So that puts you at a bigger risk of seeing effects of storm surge and other flooding issues. So again, can't stress enough, please know your individual risk and make sure that you're ready for the storm to whisk by. It will whisk by very quickly and then be out of our hair because I think we're all very sick of Hurricane Dorian at this point. But with that said, we are only getting started. As we go into the tropical climatology, we are on the upslope here, headed toward the peak, the official peak of hurricane season being September 10th. Things calm down a little bit after that, but we have another peak again in the middle of October. So this week alone, we had 3 named storms in the Atlantic Basin. We had Dorian, which we all know very well. We had Fernan that just made landfall in Mexico and is going to be pretty beneficial. It's going to bring some much needed rain to South Texas. They've been in a not so great drought going into the past couple months. So this will help bring that rainfall and bring relief to South Texas and northern parts of Mexico there along the border. And then Tropical Storm Gabrielle, which is out to sea, just came off the coast of Africa. Not expected to affect land until the next couple of days. Should just whisk off into the North Atlantic. Hopefully not be a problem for anybody. We're going to keep our eyes on it here. Of course, at My Radar, we've always got you covered here. We'll bring you up to date on the latest. So we will have another intermediate advisory here at 8 o'clock. I'm not expecting any big changes. If anything, like I said, with that 1 mile per hour, we're on the threshold. We could see Dorian go from a category 2 to 3. I'm not expecting any real big changes with that. The next full advisory will be at 11 p.m. And of course, we'll bring you the latest. You can always follow us on social media. We've got you covered on Facebook, you're on Twitter, YouTube, and in our app, My Radar. So go ahead and follow us along. We'll keep you up to date. Until next time, guys, I'm Stefanie Lauber. Take care.
Continuing hurricane coverage on My Radar.